Good morning. This is going to be the first talk of Gutenberg for the day. It's worth noting that a lot of what you're going to be seeing today is in flux and it's iterating day by day. So when we take a screenshot, that may change because that's the nature of the product as it's evolving. So, what is Gutenberg? Gutenberg, in a kind of nutshell, is the entire publishing experience. And we are starting with the editor for that. It has 3 phases to the project. The first of those is the one we're in currently, which is the editor. The next after that is going to be the customizer. Then we have theme. What it is a block-based editor. And we're going to get a little bit more into that and what that means as we kind of go through this talk. Why do we need Gutenberg? Well, in short, it's long overdue. The reality is that making rich content just isn't as easy as it should be with WordPress. And outside, there's a demand for people to consume that, and there's a demand to create that. Within WordPress, we expect users to know the WordPress way to write and create content. We expect that and almost demand that from our interfaces. And we expect developers to code the WordPress way. And outside in these ecosystems, things have changed, they have developed, and a whole new world is out there that we need to respond to. And we know that we need to do this because we know of the problems. We've seen them in usability tests, we've seen them on forums, on tracks, from feedback, from client feedback. This is all built up over time. And this project is built on the shoulders of a lot of other things and a lot of other projects of how we've got here. It may seem that Gutenberg has quickly rolled up, but it has happened over the years, evolved and built on that. It's an evolution.
So once we had established the need of this project that would rethink the whole WordPress publishing experience, and before any line of code was written, any design thought was put in, we wanted to establish some base principles. And these naturally align with the philosophy of WordPress, and namely the emphasis on openness and on honoring content foremost. So the first of these is backwards compatibility. This is the idea that my content should never be lost or generally affected by switching to a new editor. This is also the idea that the new editor should understand the content natively, or at the very least, leave it untouched. Portability is the idea that my content shouldn't be tied to anything, and also its sidekick's graceful degradation. It shouldn't be tied to any particular runtime, be it the Gutenberg one, but also even WordPress itself. Further, ideally, whatever tool and formats we come up with should play well with other editors, whether that's the mobile apps, or if you remember them, tools like Mars Edit. And as a bonus, if the content, if the formats are things that are human readable or easy to process in general, that's even better in cases of crisis. No commitment when adopting Gutenberg. This is sort of a corollary of the previous points, and it was particularly significant in the beginning of the project, because we wanted to have early testing, people just trying out the plugin, but testing shouldn't mean that you cross a river that you can backtrack from. And this was simply the idea that switching to the content format of Gutenberg or to the block-based paradigm or whatever that meant should never lead to your content to be dependent on that new runtime. Behind all this, there's a strong desire to fight lock-in, which is nothing new, but it's a pervasive problem anywhere where we have an ecosystem sort of dominated by proprietary tools. And finally, incremental development. Gutenberg aims to fundamentally reshape WordPress in general, and when WordPress impacts millions of users and powers 30% of the web, this could never happen overnight. This is a longer subject, and on the topic, I recommend my colleague Matias Venturas, who has an essay named Gutenberg or the Ship of Theseus. But enough idealisms. We can have a look at what Gutenberg actually looks like if the video, oh no. Request access. I don't think there's going to be any video. What do you want to do?
You can carry on.
As you could see from the beautiful thumbnail, when you open Gutenberg, you have this white canvas. The focus is really on the text, on the writing. You can do all your rich text formatting, and that's really all that it is in the beginning. Do you want to add something?
Could we have someone from tech to give access with that? Because we've got quite a few videos, so it would probably be awesome to be able to play them.
Should we grab our laptops?
Yeah, we've got some very specific videos that we would really like to kind of, if possible. Thank you for that suggestion.
I'm assuming this is because the videos are on Google Drive.
Yeah, they're on our
they're protected
Google
by
Drives.
permissions. So I'm wondering if it's just safer if we use one of our laptops.
Yeah. Can we switch the laptops if not?
Let's switch the laptops.
Yeah.
Fun. Should I?
Do you want to get yours? Go for it.
Oh, and I need a dongle. USB-C to HDMI, whatever.
So can I have a quick show of hands? Who has used Gutenberg in here before?
The clicker is not
Cool.
because you don't have
Okay,
USB
that's
port.
cool. I'm hoping to see more hands by the end. We encourage you to kind of explore it.
Tammie, do you have the USB-C for the clicker?
Yes, I do. I'll get that as well.
The dongle? Oh.
Do you have a connect? Yeah, thank you. We've got one here.
Awesome.
Yeah, that looks. Is that one? That's not one. That's a lightning one. I mean, we're close. Okay, I'm going to go and get mine.
That doesn't work.
No, it's fine. It's charged. Can I plug it?
Oh, okay.
No, it's good for the clicker.
Ah, okay. Here's my.
You want to use yours?
Let's go with it. I'm a bit more trusting of my clicker at this point.
Yeah. Yep. You never know,
Thank
you might need
you.
a request access for the clicker. or
Yeah, I mean, probably.
something. Probably.
Where's the? How do I not mirror?
Oh, you need to have it plugged in first. You don't have
Oh, it was unplugged. I felt to notice
It'll
that.
be good. There you go.
You got, this is for the clicker. You just got to close it out.
Okay.
Just click the X.
Okay. Is that? Okay, so probably this, right?
I think you have to drag it over there
Yeah,
first.
yeah. But like get the
Oh,
pieces.
there you go.
And so. Yeah. Okay.
You good?
I think so. How's the
You
font
open
size?
the mics back up.
Do you want to increase the contrast a little
Yeah.
bit?
Ah, yeah.
So, good news, we're back running and we have video.
Thanks for waiting.
Thank you so much for being patient there. I think we're just going to use our own laptops for a bit.
Yeah.
There you go.
Is it working? Let's try. Is the autoplay working? It is. Hopefully. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's no big deal. It's just writing.
It's worth the wait.
Do you want to take it?
that's writing within Gutenberg. Now what we're going to do, which is why we really wanted video, we wanted to show you a look inside the little bits of features of Gutenberg. What does the editor focus actually cover? This is adding a block. Will it run? Hopefully.
Come on, Google.
You can do it.
No?
No. You know, don't do a live demo, do video. It always works. There we go. OK, so this is adding a block. You click to add the block. And here you can see things like you can do background image. You can do a background and a color. And here is a little check saying, hey, these colors might not be that readable for everybody. How about you kind of think about that in what you're creating? So here I'm going to add an image. I'm hoping this isn't too blurry for everybody. And then you can write a caption, or you can add another image. And one of the really handy things you can do is by selecting both images, you can transform them into a gallery. Because if you have multiple images, you probably want to put them in a gallery. There you go, and you can see you can add an image. Now, you know that text, not very exciting. Drop image, and a little bit. There, you can see you can change the font size as well. The library, when it loads, is a way that you can add blocks. So you can do it from the top toolbar, and you can do it from actually where you have blocks as well. And what you can see is these three little kind of shortcuts. Now, blocks are in different categories. You also have embeds. So if you've ever wanted to just put a YouTube embed in without having to use a plugin, all those different ways, you can just do it, and it automatically just picks it up and outputs it with the correct code. So yeah, that is the library. Now, sidebars is a key concept within Gutenberg. Sidebars are a way that you get additional information. So this is the secondary information. And here you can see, you can access it from the block itself, but you can also access it from the top. And this looks very familiar. This looks like all the information you have about your page or post, all that kind of document information. And that's in the sidebar. It hasn't gone anywhere. It's still there, so you can just easily access that. And each block also has a sidebar.
The premise of blocks opens the way for a number of features that are operating over all of the blocks in general. One of these is shared blocks. That's the idea that you might want to take a particular block, not a block type that is a block filled with content, and say that you want to reuse this throughout different posts. So if the demo loads. OK. So I have this blog post. I'm quoting Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. I have this long quote. And at the end, I wrote this little author blog about him. And I'm going to decorate my paragraph a little. And I know I'm going to quote Antoine multiple times throughout my posts. So I just go to the options of the block, and I say, convert a shared block. And now I'm prompted for a name. I'm going to name it Antoine. Save it. And now if I start a new post, maybe I'm quoting Le Petit Prince, then I'm going to open the inserter, look for shared. There's Antoine. There's even a little preview when I hover. And there you go. And if I were to make a change within that block, that could propagate by default to all the places where it's used. Or I could detach locally and make local commit amendments. A different feature is nesting. Nesting is simply the idea that blocks can contain other blocks. It's a fundamental concept in what we call the language of Gutenberg, which means that at the parsing layer, we know what this means. And there's many applications, and this will be very impactful in the next stages of Gutenberg. For now, while we wait for the video, we're going to look at a particular application, which is the columns block. Let's try. Yes? OK. So continuing from the previous example, I'm going to detach what I had. And I pull up the inserter. And I have this block called columns. And this is simply a way of saying I need this many columns, and each one will be a normal area for adding blocks. So I take what I had, I drag my author thingy to one side, and now I insert a latest posts block, and I filter so that I can see all the posts that are related to the same author. And because the columns block is still fundamentally a block, I can take that whole set and say, make this a shared block instead. And so I could drop this in other posts. Moving on to the relationship between Gutenberg and content, there's a lot of thought put into being very accommodating of different sources of content that we can add. And to showcase this, we're going to look at a Google Docs page. And our document has lots of different formatting. It's got tables. It's got nested lists. I can just copy the whole thing, open a new post, paste, and the whole thing was assimilated into native Gutenberg blocks. In this process, the conversion was native in the sense that all of the funky markup that we sometimes find in these different platforms, Google Docs, etc., we're not importing things such as the spans, the weird formatting bits that don't really matter. We get the native content in its simplest form. And this is you, right?
Thank you. So with blocks, there are a lot of possibilities beyond the basic content types that you've seen so far. This next bit of the presentation is where we're going to take a look at that. This is the cover image block when it loads. It's going to be a pattern that's really requested a lot. It's kind of a basic thing. You know, you have an image, you add that image, then you add a bit of text. Maybe you have it bold. Maybe you add a link, the different image sizes. Now, because we have the option to have additional settings with a block, this block has those additional settings, which we're going to just see here. You can do the different positions, but you can also change the opacity of the image as well. It's a really small thing, but something that is a really common design pattern that's required by people. What about a button block? From a call out to action or a link to download, this is another common request. So what we're trying to do with these basic blocks is just give you those building pieces to create that content. And as has been mentioned with nesting, you can really combine that to make powerful content. So here you can add an image, and then again, so you add a link, and then again, it has some settings. And here you can do a background, and you can do a color. It's got that check again to say, hey, that's not a very accessible color combination. So those were both blocks that already exist within Gutenberg, within the core of Gutenberg. You might be thinking, what about the future? What about potential blocks? What about different things? Maybe an author block, for example, like this. It would be really amazing to show on a bio of an author on different posts, and you could have links to their profiles, all these different information. Or full-page adverts. This is commonly wanted again, and now it could be there within a block. You could have the settings, and this is something that I know is going to be a requested feature. And talking about adverts, a little while ago, 10up had an awesome exploration post about adverts that I really just want to call out. And this looks at where they are in a Gutenberg world. And I'd highly recommend checking it out. We're going to actually have a resource, a page provided for you with all these links, so you don't need to kind of jot them down now. And maybe you have a site that uses recipes. It could be a news site that has a cooking section, or actually a site that has recipes. And it's a block here that you really take the hassle out of using a shortcode. Shortcodes, actually, we're maybe more commonly used to using them, but the learning curve to learn things like shortcodes is really, really steep. So rather than having something like that, you can have a block that people can easily understand. And I hope you agree that it's just really easy adding a block this way.
One of the design patterns that we've been applying throughout Gutenberg and blocks is the idea of placeholders. The idea is pretty simple. It's to avoid empty states, notably empty states in the interface that don't prompt the user for what should be the expectable action. So to give an example, a basic one, if I add an image block, the most important piece of data that I would need for it would be what actual image to show. So the placeholder state basically leads me to doing that by either dragging an image, uploading, adding from the inserter, etc. This is pretty straightforward. Once I've added the image, this is what I get. I have the little controls at the corners to resize, and if you noticed, underneath I have this placeholder caption that reads write caption. And this is a simple way of letting me know that this is an option in case I didn't know. Now, I may not want a caption, and in that case, this isn't a faithful representation of what I should be seeing in the final rendered page. This is why the placeholder design pattern depends on whether a particular block is selected. If I unselect this block, perhaps because I'm moving on to the rest of my content, then this is what I get. So the placeholders are gone. If I had provided a caption, I would be seeing it, of course. The same pattern is applied throughout with similar cases such as the quote block, where I can provide an optional citation. And same thing with the gallery, which shows me tiles of the images I have. And if I'm selecting that block, the last tile will be a sort of plus sign that acts as a shortcut, adding more images. If I unselect that, I will get a faithful representation of the gallery. Moving on to templates. Templates are the kind of thing that you get when you think in terms of blocks. Just as the UI can adapt to the single block that's selected, the UI can also operate on sets of blocks. They are just what the name suggests. They're a particular configuration of blocks. So a template could be start off with a cover image, make it very wide, and then have a 2-column layout with some text in the cover image, a call to action button, for instance. They are a stepping stone towards what we call the next phases of Gutenberg development, namely full page layout. If you can picture so many of the UI elements of a typical page as becoming blocks, navigation, sidebars, widgets, all of these things, you can see how templates are actually the way to describing whole pages as these arrangements. Right now, they can be tied to custom post types, and we're going to look at a demo. So we have a custom post type that's books, and I've declared a specific template for books. And this means that when I open to compose a new book, I get all of this canvas pre-filled with the fields that I should be providing. Google Docs isn't very graceful. I wanted to look at the final state of the video. The point was that it wasn't just an arrangement of the elements, in the case, the title, the heading, and the image. I can provide some default attributes and say, this image is actually one that aligns to the left. The heading gets a custom placeholder. So instead of just saying heading, generically, you can say add author name. And then the field below, the text field, had a custom placeholder saying add book description, for instance. So this is a way of channeling the user throughout the interactions. Since we're on the subject of looking at how Gutenberg can interact with the rest of WordPress by looking at custom post types, we can have a very quick talk about the technology. I wouldn't want to place too much emphasis on the actual underlying technologies, even if they've obviously been instrumental. The buzzwords are fairly standard of any modern JS application: React, Redux, CS6, Babel, etc. But I'd like to stress that WordPress is the framework. This is similar to how things have been with WordPress as a mainly PHP project, where, sure, you're targeting PHP, but when you develop a plugin, you're speaking a certain dialect of PHP. You're using all of the WordPress ecosystem, all of its primitives. And this is what we've been trying to do with Gutenberg. The whole community has been really, really changing the way they do things. One such example is the WordPress packages project, which has been a way of modularizing such things as accessibility functions, internationalization, etc. There's a number of utils. And within Gutenberg, aside from consuming and shaping that project, we've been exposing APIs, as you would expect, but we've been trying to go beyond that and make sure that all of the project is itself very modular, and the very primitives that are used throughout the project are things that can be consumed by anyone. I will cover this much more in depth after lunch, obviously, but I'd like to point out that aside from that, we follow, insofar as possible, the WordPress core tradition of coding things whenever we see design patterns that are fitting. So hooks, that is, actions and filters, are something that exists and now also exists on the client. Using the server for all the things that the server does very well is something that we've been doing with Gutenberg. Moving on, tying back with the original principles, one was backwards compatibility. It has been maintained insofar as familiar subsystems such as shortcodes, metaboxes, and CPTs all still work the same way. There will be exceptions, there will be caveats, and for those, typically there will be fallback mechanisms. One such mechanism is the classic block, which is a way to encapsulate content that comes from the pre-block era. And in it, it will just be a way to use the very familiar TinyMC-based editor, the one that we've all been using. If all else fails, there's the official classic editor plugin, which is a way to entirely disable Gutenberg. And if not, there's a way better solution, which has just been announced, which is the VIP REM plugin, which, as the name suggests, is a way forward towards Gutenberg, but allowing a more granular and incremental adoption by saying, these posts, please keep working the same way, and for these posts, maybe I want to do things differently, or for CPTs, or any kind of categorization that we should like to make. If you're interested in the subject, Daniel Vancouver is somewhere in the audience. I think I saw him. Hey. And he's been compiling the Gutenberg migration guide. It contains specifics, what may break, how to deal with it, et cetera, et cetera. So please go chat with him if you have more questions.
Thank you. So we've shown a lot of what is coming, why, and just explaining about Gutenberg. What about the when? How do you prepare for Gutenberg? So that's going to be a lot of conversations are going to be about that over the next few days. We started a little while ago with version 1, and that came after a prototype and an iteration. And that's when the kind of plugin was out there. And we've been releasing pretty much every week or every couple of weeks up until today. And that's been a new version of Gutenberg. If you ever look at the changelog for Gutenberg, it's a lot of things are packed into a very short amount of time. It's amazing to be part of such a fast-paced project, and it's a luxury to be able to do that. And today we are really, really close to being feature complete, just a handful of features. And this means we can move then into the bug fixing and really getting ready for the next stage. The next stage is the merge proposal. This is when discussions happen about how it gets merged and take place. And some of these conversations have already been happening with component maintainers. These are people that look after areas of the WordPress product. So these conversations are already starting to happen with Gutenberg. And we've seen some milestones for each of these within GitHub. GitHub is where we actually manage the project of Gutenberg. To really get a gauge of where things are, checking out that repository is a good way to do that as well. After that, we then move into 5.0, which is when WordPress 5.0 is when Gutenberg will be released. And that will be declared, and the release leads for that will then shepherd Gutenberg, the phase 1, the editor, into that release. There is no set date, but as you can see, the project has come a long way, and we're going to ship this when the product is ready to be shipped. And I think that Gutenberg deserves us doing that for phase 1.
So between the merge and now, the imperative is really to test early, or as early as possible and provide feedback. We really can use all sorts of perspectives on how people use WordPress in general and Gutenberg. Lastly, I'd like to state that even without plugins such as the VIP ramp plugin, Gutenberg is kind of meant to be adopted incrementally if you so wish to. The reason why I say this is that when you activate the plugin, nothing really changes unless you have very specific workflows and meta boxes that may not be working as you'd expect. Nothing really changes, and if you have to edit a post, an existing post, you will not be bothered by these blocks. You will have all your content encapsulated in things such as the classic block. It's only when you decide to start a new post that by default you will have the block experience. And even then you can still choose to stick to the classic block. And then we didn't include a screenshot, but if you're working with pre-blocks content and you see the whole thing encapsulated in the classic block, you have the option of going to the block options and say, please convert all of this to blocks. Similarly to how we saw with pasting content from Google Docs. And in my experience, the conversion is pretty good. If you have very customized shapes of things, structures that may not be porting very well, in the worst case, you just undo and no change has come. And yeah.
So, after lunch, there are going to be 2 more talks on Gutenberg by us both. We're going to be splitting into different areas. Miguel is going to dive pretty deep into the technical side, and I'm going to be leading a non-technical dive. It's going to be looking at the design and the experience, and we're going to get in the TARDIS and go into the future a little bit as to what the next phases could produce. And as I said, there are going to be resources in a takeaway sheet for this. What we hope we've left enough time to do, though, is some questions with all the laptop juggling. So thank you very much.